G'day, all you music-loving self-healers and dreamers. I am Electronics, and the other week I performed my very first live performance at the Vegan Campout Australia, and this was to celebrate my debut EP release, Arcadia, which is out now on all streaming platforms. So I wanted to share my experience about the absolute terror that I go through whenever I perform live on stage. And through sharing my experience, hopefully I can give you some tips and insights on how you can overcome your fear of performing on stage, especially if this is something that you struggle with. Okay, so just a bit of background. I have performed on stage multiple times, mostly as a singer-songwriter, so just with a guitar and a microphone. But I've never really been comfortable or confident on stage. And in the past, I used to drink alcohol to help cope with these nerves and this terror that I had. I used to have a drink or two before getting up on stage, but when I gave up drinking, obviously, I no longer used alcohol to help calm my nerves. So when I gave up drinking alcohol, I used to just push through the performance and push through the fear and the terror that I had. And I never really dealt with my fear and my terror. And I always used to just, in a way, ignore it, pretend that I was okay, put on a bit of a facade that I've got my shit together, but really I'm just like dying inside. So I used to just push through my performance. But obviously, whenever you're suppressing emotions and you're trying to push emotions down, it never really works. And I used to still have this crippling terror on stage, and I never enjoyed my performances. I never felt like I actually performed really well under those emotions and under those circumstances. And I was never really myself on stage, and I used to just walk away from every performance not really enjoying it and just being really dissatisfied. So suppressing this fear and this terror was just not working and does not work, and only actually creates a more worse situation when you're actually on stage. So lesson number one is you can't actually suppress your fear. You can't suppress emotions without it having a negative impact on you and your life. So that's exactly what I was doing. I was trying to suppress my fear. I was trying to avoid these feelings without ever dealing with it. And I just never enjoyed a performance or walked away feeling satisfied with any performance I've ever done. And in 2019, I performed my last performance as a singer-songwriter, and that was just before the pandemic hit, and something very interesting happened. So on the morning of the performance, I woke up, and again, I was in complete terror, and I was just feeling very locked up in my stomach, and I couldn't breathe. So I was in the shower, and I was just finding that I couldn't even breathe, I couldn't even function normally. And what I would usually do is just push through that feeling or ignore it. But this time I decided to explore it. And the way that I did that was I just stopped. I just slowed myself down, and I just acknowledged a simple truth to myself, and that was, I'm so scared. And just through the simple act of acknowledging the truth to myself and also talking to God, that in a way surrendered me to what I was feeling. So instead of trying to fight what I was feeling, I surrendered to the feeling, wow, yeah, I'm just so scared, God. And that actually, through acknowledging that truth, that actually helped me to get into my fear tears, my crying, my grief about being so scared. So what I did was I allowed myself to cry about how scared I was. I allowed myself to feel and acknowledge how scared I was. And I let myself cry as much as I could cry until my crying stopped. And once my crying stopped, I noticed something. I noticed a massive difference in how I felt. I could breathe again. And I just had this calm and peaceful feeling, and I wasn't scared of my performance anymore. I could actually function normally again. So that was the first gig ever where I actually processed some fear, and I was able to get up on stage that day and perform the gig without being crippled by this horrible feeling of fear inside of me. And I was able to get up and actually enjoy the gig and be very grounded, and it was just a completely different feeling getting on stage after having processed that little bit of fear that I had. Well, I say a little bit, but it's actually a lot of fear that I have, but the little bit of like emotional processing I did made a world of difference. I was much more grounded, much more confident, much more just peaceful inside. Like I couldn't explain it. It was just like I was calm. I was able to approach my gig in a very rational and logical way, and I wasn't like getting overwhelmed and messing up my parts and things like that. So yeah, it was just the first time that I've ever experienced processing fear in that way before a gig, where I actually felt completely different before getting on stage. In the past, I tried to process some fear, but I still always got up on stage anxiety ridden. But this time I got up on stage very calm and peaceful and looking forward to performing rather than dreading it. But did I heal all of my fear? Absolutely no. It's impossible to heal all of your fear in one kind of experience, which we'll get into it a little bit more later on down the track. But fast forward to 2023, I'm now performing my first ever live performance as Electronics, the music producer, beat maker. And I find out months ago about this gig, but still there's that dread inside of me, that fear, where every inch of my soul is saying, don't do it, run away. And I do actually try to get out of the gig. That's how afraid I am. I don't want to perform this gig. I don't want to get on stage. I feel I'm not ready, and I just procrastinate because I don't want to get up on stage. But I still got up on stage because I couldn't actually get out of the gig. So we're 2 weeks away until the performance, and I'm starting to get my live set together, putting together my Ableton session. I'm doing rehearsals now. And everything's going fine up until the day before the gig. And that's when my friend Fia shows up. And so I'm a day out to the gig, and it's in the morning. I'm in the shower and my heart is pounding out of my chest again. I'm going into this shallow breathing and I can't actually breathe properly. And I'm like, here we go again. Like, when is this going to end kind of a feeling. But this time I know exactly what I need to do. From my last experience, I know that all I need to do is go into these feelings so that I can release some of the anxiety and the fear that's building up inside of me. And so that's exactly what I did. So again, I allowed myself to surrender to how I was feeling, acknowledge the truth, and I start to talk to God and to pray about how scared I am. I not only acknowledge the truth of how scared I am, but I acknowledge what I'm scared of. I'm scared that I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to make mistakes on stage. I'm scared that I'm going to be judged. I'm scared that I'm going to, completely fail at my performance. I'm scared about the technology not working. I'm scared of so many different things, and I just start talking to God about what I'm afraid of, what might happen, just so I can acknowledge the truth to myself. I not only talk about what I'm afraid about with God, but then I also talk to God about what happened to me in my childhood to make me this afraid. And so I go a step further this time and feel about the time when I was 5 years old and I was performing in my end of school year performance, and I had so much fun on stage and I felt really chuffed about my performance. And I get off stage and my uncle mocks and teases me and makes me feel really stupid. And I felt really judged in that moment. And so I allow myself to feel about this and to cry about, being teased as a little 5-year-old. I let myself feel everything. And I just, as I'm feeling and as I'm allowing myself to cry and feel about these fears, I'm also talking and praying to God, about these things that I'm scared about. And then once I'm done feeling and crying and processing through all of these fears, again, I feel completely calm again, at peace. I can function again, I can breathe normal, and I can go about my day and continue on with my rehearsals. So it's proven to me a second time now that this process works. That if I just allow myself to feel these fears and acknowledge them, it's going to release and I'm going to be able to function normally again. So I get through that day awesomely. I continue on with my rehearsals. Everything goes well. I'm feeling very confident and prepared for my performance. And so we get there to the gig on that day, and everything's going fine, except there's a few things that kind of heighten my anxiety to do with the sound and the AV person, and a little bit of disorganization happening. So that, definitely raises your anxiety a little bit, because you're not only, thinking about what you have to do, but you want to make sure that everything else is working, and, you're trying to make sure that all the tech is going to run smoothly for the performance. So everything was going fine until I start setting up my gear. And then the crowd starts rolling in, and guess who shows up? My friend Fia again. So I start, getting severe anxiety. My heart's pumping out of my chest. My hands are starting to shake. I'm starting to also freeze up, like lock up. And I can feel myself running out of breath and overheating. And I just am going through a massive, severe anxiety inside. So I get through setting up all my gear, and I'm just feeling absolutely terrible. I do a little bit of a test run with the sound guy, and I find that I can't actually play the notes of my song because my hands are that locked up and I'm that afraid. And I'm just oh my gosh, this is a disaster. I'm not going to be able to play anything. What am I going to do? I start to go into even more panic mode. The fact that I can't play and that I'm messing up all my notes, and I'm actually even forgetting how I'm playing things. So that's how intense my fear was getting. So I finished the setup and the little sound test, and I go to the side of the stage, which is where our kind of green room was. And it's so hot under this little tent in this little area that I'm I need to get out of here. So I go outside the tent, and I'm just outside, and I'm just taking in the fresh air, just allowing myself to just sit down. And that's where I was I need to have a feel, I'm just going to let myself cry right here. So I'm off to the side of this tent out the back, and I'm just sitting there crying and just letting this fear, release out of me, just acknowledging that I'm so scared. And I talk to God again. I'm just allowing myself to feel this fear, and I'm feeling these fear tears, and that's what we call it, fear tears. For me, for some reason, I can't process or release any fear without crying, without expressing it in that way. So I'm just off to the side of the stage, and I'm just allowing myself to be overcome by my grief, my pain of being in so much fear. And I'm thinking, man, I don't know. I started to doubt the process. I'm is this even going to help me to feel calm, and sure as anything, after, it was just literally a 5-minute cry. After I let out these tears, again, I felt calm and peaceful again. This anxiety left me, and I felt oh, I can get up on stage now. I'm not going to completely fall apart. And I felt I could get up on stage in a very grounded and calm manner. So yeah, I feel I'm much more grounded. I am much more calm. I don't feel the the hands, I don't feel frozen anymore where I can't actually function properly. Obviously not all of my fears completely gone, but enough of it has gone to the point where I can actually get up and function normally. And, I had basically what you would call just minor butterflies, a little bit of anxiousness, but not to the point where it was completely overtaking me. So I was able to get up on stage, perform my set, and the crowd was amazingly supportive. And yes, I did make a few mistakes here and there, but I was much more gentle about it with myself, much more compassionate. It wasn't the end of the world. My goal was to get up on stage and just have some fun. And yeah, just going through that process of crying before getting up stage helped me to be much more softer, much more grounded, much more gentle with myself, and enabled me to get up and just have some fun and not take everything so seriously. And I actually got off stage just feeling so happy and so much more joy. Like, yeah, I made some mistakes. And usually, if I hadn't processed through any fear, I'd be so harsh towards myself. I'd be so judgmental and attacking, or like putting myself down. Oh, you fucked up your whole performance. You made, these mistakes. And like, I would just like judge myself so harshly and be such a harsh critic. But I actually got off stage, even though I made some mistakes, and yeah, it wasn't the perfect performance, but I still had fun. I was able to get off stage and actually feel happy and joyful and accomplished that I actually did it. I felt really proud of myself for pushing through it all and for not listening to my fear and not letting fear overcome me and dictate my life. I was just felt so happy in the sense that I showed up and I did it and I felt through my fear, and yeah, there was happiness just from doing that. I did it, like I got up on stage and I accomplished my goal, which was to perform on stage this year. So it was just such an amazing feeling afterwards. I felt so happy and so grateful, and it was just such a contrast to what I would usually feel like getting off stage if I hadn't dealt through any fear. Like I just felt at peace with my achievement. So everyone is different in how they process and release fear, but for me, this is the formula in how I process and release fear. Some people might be able to just breathe diaphragmatically, very slowly in and out, and maybe shake, and that's how they process their fear. For me, whenever I get overcome by fear and terror, I can't actually breathe. Like it doesn't matter how much I try to breathe slowly in and out, it just doesn't work. So for me, the fear tears is what works for me. Like I actually need to actually stop and just cry about how scared I am. And that's what works for me in releasing my fear and helping me to feel calm before a gig. So to summarize, my tips would be, first, try diaphragmatically breathing very slowly in and out. If that doesn't work, then go to the fear tears. Let your fear tears out, and in the process, talk to God about how you feel. Talk to God about how scared you are and admit it and say, I'm just so afraid. Talk about why you're afraid. What are you afraid that's going to happen? And verbalize it out loud. I'm scared that this is going to happen, God. I'm scared that that's going to happen, and talk about like what you're afraid of that might happen in this performance. So feel why you were scared and say it out loud. By saying it out loud, this helps you to connect to your feelings and your emotions. And this is where you might actually start to cry, which is a very beautiful thing. And if you can, then go deeper into your childhood and discover where this fear was created inside of you. And as I said before, for me, my fear stems from being ridiculed as a 5-year-old after performing on stage, and just from making mistakes in general and, basically being judged for that. And while you're doing this, if you can keep talking and praying to God throughout the process, that is going to help you even more to get into your feelings and your emotions. And just keep doing this process until you finish crying or finish feeling. And it doesn't matter how long you cry for. It could be 1 minute, it could be 2 minutes. Don't be hard on yourself if it's only a very short amount of time that you feel your fear. Like allow yourself to feel your fear for as long as you can. And if you don't feel like you have any more tears and you finish crying, that's okay. So it could be range from, crying for 1 minute up to 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long. It does not matter. The most important thing is you observe how you feel afterwards. And if you feel calm, grounded, and like you can breathe properly again, you've just processed some fear. So as I mentioned before, like, did I heal all of my fear of performing on stage when I processed fear for the first time? And the answer was no. And that's because it's impossible to heal all of your fear in one go. You definitely won't be able to heal all of your fear after one performance. And you'll find that you'll need to keep repeating this process until you get to the stage where you're just excited to get on stage and there's no fear present whatsoever. And how long this will take will vary from person to person. For some people, it might be shorter than others, but for others, it might take years to heal all of the fear that you have about getting on stage. But the most important thing is you keep repeating the process until you feel out all of the fear where it no longer exists in you anymore. For me, I envision this process is going to take a while. So depending on, how much I get out and perform will depend on how much I actually process through this fear. So if I challenge myself a bit more in the coming year or years in performing and getting out there more and more, I will be able to process more and more fear until I get to the point where I no longer feel afraid of getting on stage. But I envision for myself that it's going to take a few years of processing through this fear of performing on stage. And it really is a terror of being myself in this world without being ridiculed, judged, or being imperfect. It's a big fear and terror of being imperfect and not doing things, perfectly. And there's a lot of anxiety and terror that comes with performing on stage because there's always going to be mistakes. There's always going to be imperfections. And it's about getting to that point of not fearing those imperfections and not letting the anxiety and terror overcome you about getting on stage. So there's a lot for me to feel through still about performing on stage, but I just wanted to share that process because it's helping me so much with my performances. So rather than focus on how long this is going to take for me to feel through fear and completely heal it, the most important thing is for me is to continue to challenge myself and not listen to my fear. So continue to get up on stage and continue to be humble to that experience of going through my fear every time I go to perform. So it's important for me to just keep surrendering to the truth of how scared I am in that moment, what I'm scared about, and also feeling through the grief that I have about where this fear was created in me during my childhood. And I encourage you to do the same. So if you're somebody that is afraid of performing on stage, I encourage you to go through and experiment with this formula and this process of feeling and working through fear and see how that changes you, or just observe how you feel afterwards. So if you want to learn more about how to heal trauma, you can check out this playlist up here. And if you haven't yet checked out the songs on my debut EP, Earth Arcadia, feel free to head to your favorite streaming platform to have a listen. I'll leave a link in the description. And if you have any questions about how to process through fear when performing on stage, please leave a comment and I'll do my best to get back to you. Also, to help you out, I have links to other resources in the description of this video on how to process through fear. Again, my name is Electronics. Thank you so much for joining me, and I shall talk to you soon.